It is Pirate Utopia, so I mean, essentially, it's like an online pirate ship that you can board and then kind of, at least so far, we've been suggesting that our guests kind of like take over the ship and steer it and kind of talk about their work or explain what they're doing or projects they're feeling passionate about, or topics that need to be discussed. So I don't know if Erin's probably given you some sort of a rundown of Pirate Utopia, but
A little bit.
Yeah, that's basically kind of ish, I just said it's pretty informal, but yeah, like I was excited to talk to you just because um I'm really interested in a lot of the work you were doing, especially after I sent you forces in our little conversation there. And I was pretty moved by like kind of your story, especially recently. And I've also been liking the stuff you were doing like prior to COVID with what was it called again with Major, the project you were working on?
Temple of Hedonism.
Yeah, the Temple of Hedonism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, why don't you give us like a little background, what your main projects have been over the past couple years, and what you're interested in, and then especially the past few months and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So let's see. Like first and foremost, I'm a mom. I'm a mom of five, and I think that makes a big part. It's just a big, huge part of me. So I've been momming real hard for the past 23 years, and that has been such an incredible journey and experience. I would say the scariest part of momming and parenting in general is seeing like your negative patterns come out to kind of slap you in the face and be like, oh, that's for me. I taught her or him that. Wow, okay. That's not going to really serve them very well in their life, huh? So I guess it's like time for some self work, and how can I help them overcome that? So that's been probably one of the biggest transformative experiences in my life. And for the first part of their life, I was like super religious and authoritarian, and that was like the first half of their life, and monogamous and married, and a Sunday school teacher. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background. It's just like, and then I turned real naughty. Um, but really, what happened is I kind of just like had this awakening, and I have to say that it actually happened. So I stopped smoking pot when when I was pregnant, basically, right? That was 23 plus years ago, right? When I was pregnant with my oldest child, and I started when I was like 15 or 14, and then I stopped that whole time while I was basically having babies. There was 11 years while I was like having babies, having babies, having babies. And then that first time that I can remember it like very clearly, that first time that I took a hit of cannabis, I was just like, oh, there's like so much of me that I had forgotten. I had gotten so caught up and lost in being mommy and breastfeeding and being pregnant, and then that it was like coming home to me, and it was really like medicine that way, like brought me back into my body and back into who I was and who I wasn't.
hmm.
So yeah, that's a bit like I love like the meshing of all of these things. Like there's the meshing of psychedelics on psychotherapy, and then there's the meshing of of um, psychosomatics. I do a lot of work with the body and helping connect the body and the mind, and it's really powerful work. And then there's this other aspect that I've really been focused on a lot lately, which is sexual health as a part of mental wellness and health overall. Like this is just a thing that in our culture, especially, but in so many cultures, we're just taught from a very early age to just kind of like cut ourselves off from our sexuality, from our genitals, from our sex, from our sexual desires, from our natural states of arousal. We're just taught from very early on. Well meaning parents, don't touch that. Oh, that's for you in your bedroom. Oh, we don't do that. Or, like shame. I work with so many people who like their first experiences with pleasure were shameful experiences, and that's creating like like that's creating neurobiology in there. There's like transmitters go in that are going, oh, this is bad, right? And those early memories are actually what programs those programs just keep running in our life until we have like this moment where we're like, holy shit, why do I think that? Why do I believe that? Right? So that's mainly what my work is in, is just really helping people recognize one, their early programming, and how that may or may not be serving them. And then two, getting people in touch with their bodies. And I've done a lot of that in a lot of different ways. This has been a long journey. Um, but like psychedelics are part of it. I've studied shamanism. I've done some shamanic practices with different shamans around the world. And I helped start the Native American Church of Central Texas,
Oh,
women
wow.
run, women led. And what I feel coming together now during this time of, I don't know, great awakening or whatever we might want to call it, right? The pandemic is just like, when I think about what the gift in it for me has just been like this ability to slow down and reprioritize. And so I feel like things are coming together. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me. Do have a background in the medical field. I was a childbirth educator, breastfeeding educator, and a licensed midwife for over a decade. And that's kind of what got me into. I actually remember being in biology in ninth grade and us the first like in-depth study of human biology and being like, holy crap, our bodies are so cool. And then I kind of forgot about it, right? But then at 19, I found myself pregnant. And it was the first time in my life that I ever felt like super connected to my body and that I wanted to take care of my body. And so it was a really transformative experience for me to just really connect with my body, listen to my body and what she needed, what I needed to grow a baby. Do you know that you make almost twice as much blood when you're pregnant?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like there's a lot of physiological things going on in there. And I loved it. I loved giving birth. There's a lot of physiology going on in there. And then there's also this like animal instinct of intuition that we know how to give birth. It's just like, we don't need to be taught. And so being a midwife really gave me this insight into how medicalization of birth was overrunning so many women's natural intuitive abilities to know their bodies. And so my job as a midwife was freaking amazing. It was just to like get the hell out of the way and reassure them that their body was doing exactly what it needed. And that's what happened 99% of the time. And there was this small percentage of time where I needed to be there to help when we did sometimes need interventions, when we did sometimes need some more medical help. But it was such a rare amount of time. And so, yeah, giving birth and was just like one of the most, I remember actually, um, my partner, my co-parent, I remember after she was born, we looked at each other and we're just like, holy shit, what was that? I was like, dude, that was like the biggest trip I've ever been on. Like endorphins, oxytocin. I mean, like I'd done plenty of psychedelics by that time in my life. And just to go on this journey of like listening to my body and being overpowered was amazing. So that's kind of what started me on towards doing the work that I do now in sexuality, was just being super blessed and lucky to be involved with these beautiful, powerful women and their families in this time of their life, and learning how to make that safe space and helping them trust their bodies and themselves. So that's kind of what got me down the journey of the road. And then, I mean, realistically, a big part of it was like 12 years of monogamous marriage that, we were 17 and 18 when we met, and we were 30 when I finally separated and walked away. He was 31, and we were just hugely different people than we had been. And I stayed so long in a marriage that wasn't serving either one of us. And we lost connection sexually, we lost connection emotionally, we lost connection mentally. And there was just like, and so actually I was really deeply involved in the church. And so when I left my marriage, women in the church would tell me, well, who's going to want you with 5 kids? And so I really did. I left my marriage just going, okay, well, no one may ever want me, but I think I'd rather be alone every day than miserable with this human and making him miserable. And so I walked away, and I really did not believe I was beautiful. I didn't believe I was sexy, and I thought no one was ever going to want me. What a mind fuck, right?
Right.
I am happy to say that was all bullshit.
And no one ever wanted you again, and that's how we got here. Yeah.
Right. And that
Yeah,
transmuted into sex goddess somehow here. Yeah, I love
I
that.
think yeah, because that was so fascinating. I remember I had like I had known you just through the scene, we'd met at like various parties and stuff. And then I remember I was doing a catering gig and I met an old friend of yours, Abigail, who actually told me about that I think you had given birth to her kids, right? Or you had helped her or
I
whatever.
was her doula. Yeah, I was there for her. Yeah.
Well,
And yeah, and it was so interesting because she totally opened up my eyes because I had never known about your past as like being very Christian and stuff. And I totally identify with that. And so that's because I grew up super, super Christian. And so I feel like for me, that opened a lot. And to see like how you were interacting and the kind of waves that you were making in that scene is the whole non-monogamous scene and poly and all of that stuff here was kind of really inspirational to me because it was like, oh, okay, yeah, we can exit out of it. And yeah, and I think it's so fascinating that because I think you mentioned to me the other day when we were kind of just texting, how like you've been really inspired in terms of like your mission and was something about helping people change their what was it, their like the repressed trauma around sexuality that we carry with us from childhood. And I think it's interesting, having that background. It hadn't occurred to me, but now it's like, oh yeah, having the background as being a midwife. And it's like I think there's so much trauma that we get from childbirth, even the fact that we mutilate so many boys' penises right after they come out of the right after they come out into the world. They're like, oh cool, chop that off. And all of these other things. And then the little messages were given like, no, boys don't do that, girls don't do that, wear this, wear that, and all this stuff. And we carry that with us into our lives, into our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and we haven't dealt with it. And it's like super powerful that you're kind of like I was gonna say burning the candle at both ends, but in a cool way. It's like you're coming at it from two perspectives. From the being the mother, but also from the childhood aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I've really been led into, I mean, I'm just a big nerd. I just love like researching, and humans are my favorite subject essentially. And I made these five amazing, incredible humans that, are part of my DNA. And then I brought them into this world, and it was none of that was conscious. But when I look into the subconscious of that, my childhood was very lonely. So, like, recognizing the reasons why we do things in and of itself and our early programming is transformative right there. Like, I can look at it now and go, my childhood was really lonely. So, how did I heal that broken-hearted aspect of me? I made a family. It's so big that I will never be lonely again. Like, that's just not a thing for me, right? I never have to worry about being lonely again. And I like that was so subconscious, right? Like, that was not something that I had planned, you know. But I think that one of the most powerful things that we can do for ourselves is to really learn and understand our own programming, right? And
Oh, totally.
it takes something to go, why do I think that way? It takes a lot to be able to really question our own ideologies and where they came from, because we're born with like two fears, right? We're born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And we know how to eat and we know how to shit. And everything else from there is basically taught and programmed and ingrained into us early on, whether or not we're loved, whether or not we're cared for, whether or not we're wanted. And um and yeah, like being a midwife is really a powerful thing for me too, because I really like wonder like how different would the world be if we if like if birth control was just like handed out like candy and everybody was able to get in, everybody was able to access it, so that every child that comes into the world was deeply wanted and prepared for and desired and honored and treasured. Like, it would fucking change the world. It would change the world. And I honestly feel a little bit um betrayed by my own biology as a woman, in that even now at 43 years old, I have a cycle every month. I could get pregnant. My youngest child is 12, almost 13. There's no way in hell I want another child. Yet I have to do something on a regular basis. If I'm going to be having sex with people who have create sperm, I have to do something. They have to do something. We have to do something in order to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's this part of me that just wishes it was the other way around. I wish that we could just be born infertile and take a pill when we're like, oh, you know what I'm ready to do? I'm
Mm.
ready for a human. I'm ready to be responsible for the next 18 years of a human. And I've looked at my own conditioning, and I have the mental wherewithal to handle this, and the support and in everything that I need to do this. And that would change the world because a big part of what we're not looking at, I mean, I have this superwoman complex, and I think, like, I feel like I can change the world, but I'm really just making these little small changes that I do see. But if I look at, like, how can we make big change in the world, and it really is like we're really underestimating the effects of childhood trauma.
Mm.
Oh, totally.
And the longest study ever done on humans, it's a Harvard study. It's the 80-year study done on humans. It's followed college students from, that one? Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Followed college students from, early on all the way up until their 80s, and then it followed their children, right? And the number one thing that affected long-term success, health, well-being, financial stability, happiness, overall wellness was childhood trauma.
Mm.
And when you look at our homeless, the people who are most affected, the people who are, it's our homeless community, our prison community, all of these people, these are effects of trauma. And so, like, I do these, yes, I'm the sex love goddess, right? And I host sex parties, and I teach these classes and workshops, and that's what Temple of Hedonism is. But the other aspect of this, and the underlying current, is that this is an important part of our overall wellness. And there are plenty of other people who are focused on nutrition and diet and mental wellness, and I do that too. But there aren't a lot of people who are advocating for sexual wellness.
Mm.
No,
And
you're so right. I feel like I spend like the majority of like my kind of reading and stuff in a lot of, new thought, self-help, how to change your story and all that stuff. And of all the most popular people, whether it's Tony Robbins or, all these different people like that, like they barely ever talk about like sex and sexuality. They're talking, you're exactly right. There's nutrition and there's, money and all of these things, but and it's funny because they kind of just gloss over it, or they're very traditional. It's very like monogamous, traditional. You're a man, you're a woman, you need to, be the normal stereotype of that. And I really want to expand that that realm to people, and make and almost like increase the representation of it to people who are alternative sexuality, like who are people who are queer, people who are different gendered, who are trans or whatever, or people who are just poly, and things like that, to kind of say like it's open for all of us and there's all these options out there.
Yeah,
I have a
this fits pretty nicely, Sasha. With we just did the show called "A Year Without Touch" a couple nights ago, and it was, I mean, it was put on by Aaron's collective, Touch Collective, but it was kind of about like COVID and how it's affected our sexual health as a collective. I mean, I don't know about like anybody else on this call, but like I had way less sex in 2020 than I would have, than I would have liked to admit, and a lot of that was like, even if you met somebody new, it's like you met them behind a mask. You didn't know how COVID sensitive they're being, and as fun and as exciting as it can be in the beginning with somebody, like having those layers for me was like this just, it made it way more difficult. And I wonder if it brought up my like demons or my bad habits to the surface, because if we're supposed to be getting 5 to 8 hugs a day to be emotionally healthy, I don't know that I'm getting that. I'm definitely not getting 8 hugs a day. No way. And I think that's like probably true for a lot of us during the pandemic. So I wonder if Sasha, like, you could speak to like, did that bring more clients towards you looking for answers, or did you have to like shift gears in how you're going to approach this? Because I mean, that's cool, you want to throw a sex party, I'd love to go, but it's like we can't go right now, like unless it's super underground. It's kind of irresponsible to have a party of more than 10 people.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing any in-person events. Everything's gone virtual.
Uh-huh.
I actually do virtual online play parties, which is basically like our own. I mean, voyeurism is participation. So there's exhibitionists. It's very private. You have to come by invite only. We make agreements, but it's basically like live porn. We are creating porn with each other, and it's amazing. It's super fun. It's engaging, and we hear so many people be like I remember one of the first ones that I did right when the lockdowns came. I was like, okay, I just reached out to a few people and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try this. Let's try this out, right? This was like in March. We're having to cancel all of our events, and so I only had like 5 or 6 people, but I remember one of them was a young man in his 20s, and most I think there were 2 women and 4 men, and so who all identified as men. And at first he was like, I was really triggered at first coming here and just seeing all these men and seeing all these men's cocks, and he's like, but then I started realizing, like, oh, look, he touches himself like I do, and like, oh wow, look, that turns me on too, and just like realizing all of these things in his head that he had decided were not okay were actually okay, and it just normalized being more open, normalized sexuality in this more open way where we can talk about it. Like one of my main goals in life is just to normalize the conversations around sexuality, just to normalize it, because without those conversations, so many relationships end because they can't get through the conversations, just the communication around what they want. And then a lot of people don't even know. They don't know what they want. So it's hard to be in a relationship with another human when you don't know what you want. I mean, basically, it's just trial and error,
Oh,
right? It's like, yeah, I think I want this. Let's try it. And then if it doesn't work out, then somebody's upset. They don't know how to communicate. I mean, just like it's just normalizing the conversation. But it's funny that you guys you talk about the year without touch, because this is the card that my friend created. It's called "Let's Talk About Sex" deck,
oh yeah.
and this is the card. I don't know where my deck is. I use it all the time. I host online events with it, but I can't find my deck. But this card goes, the longest I've gone without sex has been.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm normally pretty sexually active. I normally have you talk about poly. I normally have at least three lovers or more. I've been solo poly for the past 3 years almost. But I got COVID 6 weeks ago.
Hmm.
At 7, it's almost been 7 weeks, 7 weeks ago. And I have not had sex in that 7 weeks since I got COVID. So that's the longest I've gone since I was married. Since I was married. When I was married, we would go long periods of time without sex. But yeah, so, but like I would have thought I was broken last year if this just happened, right? If I just like my libido just kind of went away, I would have thought I was broken. But my traditional Chinese medicine doctor was like, hey, you're healing. Your body's like in heal mode. So like extra blood for libido and arousal, yeah, not yet, because I have some heart stuff going on. My heart is in recovery. That's the one that's been most affected by COVID. So yeah, that was really helpful to just realize, okay, and it's given me personally an opportunity to look at, like for me, sex is one of my favorite coping techniques. Had a bad day, let's fuck it
Yeah.
out. Right? Like so instead of using sex, I've had to come up with new coping techniques. I mean, throughout this entire pandemic, not just in the past 7 weeks, right? And I
Mhm.
think that it is bringing up, I would say that the collective world is in trauma right now. We've had to face, we don't have our normal coping techniques of being with humans. And I used to host cuddle parties, which is no sex. It's just cuddling, just touch, right? Which is super transformative for a lot of people. And so I was used to all of this touch in my life, and providing these opportunities for people to find this touch. And so yeah, I think that people have had to recognize that, one, their coping techniques that they had before pandemic are no longer available to them. Even if it's like going out and socializing and being around people, drinking, whatever your coping techniques were before, that's had to shift and adjust during this pandemic time. We've had to find new ones for ourselves. So as far as my business is concerned, I've gone all virtual. Actually kind of been focusing a lot more on the mental wellness aspect of my business. A lot of people with past trauma have recognized their trauma during this, and so I get a lot of people reaching out saying, hey, I'm realizing this is coming up, I'd like to work with you with this. I have a really great story, if we have time for it, about the importance of mental wellness and sexuality.
Please, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I have a client who came to me, I think it's been 4 or 5 years now, and he gives me permission to share the story. Um, and he came to me, and he came to me first as a cuddle client, because I also do pro cuddling sessions, right? And he shared with me he had this tickle fetish. Like, he likes to just tickle people. And I was like, oh, okay, well, we can talk about that at your first session. I'm not sure how that'll fit in. And then at our first session, he also shared with me that he had been depressed and suicidal from a very early age, and basically all of his adult life. And he was in his late 20s, I believe, when he came to see me. And so he's like, okay, well, I have to say that I really want more than cuddling. I want to dive into exploring more around sexuality and intimacy. I've had one sexual partner in my entire life, and that didn't go great. And so I really have no experience whatsoever. And I really have no idea, when anytime I see a woman that I'm attracted to, I just clam up. I can't talk to women at all. I need your help. And I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to shift you over from cuddle only to let's work on intimacy, because you want like skills and build and confidence training and everything. And so we slowly worked through different things of intimacy, trying to see what made him feel good, what he liked, what his body was comfortable with, what he wasn't. And he would see me twice a month, and he had to budget this in, right? He was like, really budget in to make sure that I fit into his budget. And if I was traveling for a month, it was almost guaranteed that I would come back and he would be in a really bad place. Like, he would be making plans for his suicidal ideations, right? And so I had to really be careful. And when I realized he was suicidal, I really had to take it on upon myself and go, am I really willing to work with a client that's suicidal?
Mm.
And what that meant about me, right? And it taught me so much. Like, working with this client it taught me so much. But slowly but surely, we would try different things. We would, explore different things. I would give him homework. Go try this. Go look at this. We worked on porn and how that affected his life and how that had affected him. That was most of his sexuality and any kind of arousal came from what he saw in porn. And slowly but surely, through the years, we found out that he has a foot fetish, and that his tickling is part of this foot fetish that he's had for a very long time. Doesn't know where it came from, but then he found out that there are people do foot fetish parties. And he started going to foot fetish parties, and just slowly but surely, through our work and like working through trauma and working through his early programming and the negative aspects that he had been programmed with that first sexual encounter, we realized that he is just a kinky freak. And once he found that love and acceptance for himself, I'm happy to report that he's no longer suicidal. It's been over a year. He has a girlfriend who is a foot fetish model.
Oh,
And he is now an advocate for just foot fetish and those, and like helping people. And so I'm going to say his name. It's at Soul Scream, SOLESCREAM. And you can follow him on Instagram, and he shares interviews, and he's like a huge advocate. He helps host the parties. He helps create content.
wow.
This one little thing, which you would say, right, sex is not that important, right? Society says sex is not that important. The medical industry says sex is not that important, right? Unless we can sell you a pill. But this one aspect of his life literally changed him from wanting to live or die.
Wow.
And that's not the only story that I have like that, but that's the one most like, oh, we saw the transformation, right?
Uh-huh.
And and saw the importance. Like, there were times when this man, throughout our years working together, he wanted to die. And so finding this acceptance for himself and finding support for it. And now I had no idea. And so for me, it's opened up my whole world. I'm like, oh, foot fetish is a thing. I had no idea. Like, I like feet too. I didn't even know it. It's just like, I get into it now. It's just like, okay, this has brought up so many things for me that I hadn't explored. And just, I think that shame of not understanding our own desires and not understanding, like, why we couldn't understand why he wasn't turned on by just regular sex either. Like, why didn't regular sex really do it for him, right? But you add in some tickling and you add in some feet, and it was like, whoa, that was it. That was the ticket, right? That was the beautiful thing that just switched the switch on for him. And like, how many more of us are walking around like this?
Mm.
For me, the big one was being queer. You know, I knew I was attracted to women like the minute I hit puberty. I was like, oh, boobs. Oh, I'm not supposed to look at those. I am not, right? Like it was just like
Uh-huh.
that's not okay for me. I'm not supposed to look at that. And I knew I was attracted to women from the minute I hit puberty, but because of, you know, religious social programming, it wasn't acceptable. And, you know, I had experiences with women, but it was always for men. And then when I got married, and then I got really religious when I was married, we played it off as just like, oh, that was curiosity, all those things you tried before, right? But then I became a midwife. And my whole focus was in serving women, right? And being
Uh-huh.
with women. And then it wasn't until after I got divorced and had been divorced for a few years that I was just like, I should give this another look at, you know? And then I realized I'm queer as fuck. Like, I love women, I love men, I love trans people, I love everybody in between. I really don't give a fuck what your genitals are or what, you know, what you have in between your legs. I really just love humans. And that was huge for me. And not only did it open up what I was attracted to, you know, like now my like what I'm attracted to is like, wow, I have like all of this range of what I'm attracted to. But it also allowed me to find in my own self where I trend towards being the giver rather than the receiver, right? When where I want to be and you know, in different roles in my own life. So that's been really beautiful to be able to embrace that of myself. And like, you know, our trans community, our LGBT community has a really high rate of suicide rate amongst youth, especially, but in general. And so, how many of us are growing up in homes that are telling us we can't be who we really are?
Mm.
You know, so
No,
this is
it's
where it's like mental health and sexual health, like they're so interconnected.
no, I feel like there's something to like, because you don't, it's almost like with, if you use the example of, just being hungry can affect the way you are to other people so much. And it's like, while that one's very like, societally okay to talk about, there is a lot about, just what we're interested, like our sexual satisfaction overall. And you don't realize what, like, if you're not satisfied, sexually, you don't really realize how that might be affecting your relationships in every area, whether it's, with your friends, with your family, with your work, people you work with, and it just like explodes. And I think it's really big because, in my life and with a lot of people I know, that's been a common critique, at least on the male side. With people complaining like never could tell me what he wanted. He didn't know what he wanted. He just, I don't know, I want this, insert, kind of normal fantasy kind of thing or something, and kind of porn, mainstream porn fantasy or whatever. And I think that is huge, that there are a lot of relationships that like good relationships that fall apart because people are ashamed of what they might be into. Maybe they're a little queer, maybe they're into something like feet, and they're afraid that if they tell someone that, their partner, or if their friends find out, then they're going to be lonely. Their friends are going to make fun of them, or their partner's going to leave them, and they're just going to be kind of like how you felt when you left your partner. um, uh, and just that, like, oh no, you're gonna be lonely for the rest of your life with this creepy little fetish, and you're never, no one's ever gonna want to love you. And I think it's so important that you're there doing that work, encouraging people, and to like find, like, there are actual communities. Any kink that is out there, there is a community of people who understand it and can help educate you on the proper ways to do it, and can explore it with you, and have fun, and won't judge you for it. Actually, I do want to credit you too. I remember it was at one of your parties, perhaps it was your birthday party, and you were doing a little talk before, and you mentioned something about how when you have the conversation of whether, the STI conversation, and you were saying we use the term clear in like here, not clean, which is what the normal term is. And I thought that was really powerful, because it's like there's nothing dirty about you if you have a disease, if you have an STI, because everybody makes mistakes. Everything it's not always just this like, oh, I chose to get this thing. And there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you're not any less worthy of love just because you have an STI. And I actually have been using it a lot with respect to COVID, because I think there's a similar thing going on where it's like if you get COVID, and obviously I understand why it makes everything more complicated. If someone you close to gets COVID, you have to change plans and stuff. But I have been trying to say clear instead of clean, like when I get a negative result or something like that, or because I did find that very powerful, like, and it's really upsetting about that, especially for people who do have STIs that, like they have to, they're all like, especially people with, what is it? The words are not coming to me today. Where you just get the sores.
Yeah, it's HSV. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like people with that, where it's not really even that deadly of a disease, but like it's so embarrassing for them to like have to tell partners that. And especially nowadays, like whenever you meet a new person, it is like having that STI conversation just for hanging out, like who have you been with? What are your protocols? What's your thing? And it's it's super awkward to get used to. And I do want that, that kind of to be normalized, where it's like, okay, that's what you got. Like, it's fine. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it, and let's make it sexy to have that conversation and to be aware of that.
Yeah, I think that it's really important too to recognize that like it's more about like normalizing these conversations, because when shame enters the picture, right? Shame, then well, that doesn't make us, not do the perhaps more risky behavior, right? It just makes us not be honest about it,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I noticed. Like I had COVID, right? And so I banished myself because I got it. I didn't get it staying home. And I didn't get it wearing a mask. Okay. I got it for my birthday,
Hmm.
doing more, risky behavior. And I recognized that and I made plans. It was like I made plans. I knew that when I came home, I wasn't going to come straight home. I was going to, because I have kids here. And so I made plans to kind of quarantine myself. And in that quarantine time, I found out that I had COVID. Right. And so I like banished myself to a friend's house who was out of town. He came back into town, so I went to a lover's beach rental that was empty down at the beach. And on my way down there, I was like really hungry, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get groceries ordered. I had some groceries with me. I'm going to get groceries ordered when I get there, but I really want to get something on the way down there. And I found a drive-in that had food that I can eat. I have a special, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go through this drive-through. I don't want to get anybody sick, right? And so I tell the lady while I'm ordering, I was like, I'm going to have this, this, and I want to let you know that I have COVID, so that if you that you might want to make sure that you have put on a glove when you take my card and swipe it, right? And she's like, oh, well, actually I've been told that we can't serve people with COVID. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, that's what that's going to do, right? I was like, I'm just going to go to the next drive-through and I'm not going to tell them. And that's essentially what we're doing, right? It's
Yeah.
like when we shame people, and that's what I see a lot happening in social media, is that all this shame. Oh, I saw you with your friends. I saw you out with, all of this shame. Shame's not doing shit for people. Like, let's be real. Let's be honest. There are high risks with COVID, right? Not everybody survives, and not everybody just recovers. Some of them don't even know they have it, and other people like me are having, issues 7 weeks post afterwards. So really, it's like, what can we do to be safer? Like, instead of this shame, fuck this shame. Like, I have
Mhm.
like, like, sure, shame can work in some ways, but most of the time shame just kind of, what it creates is like a certain type of self-loathing. And then it also teaches us that it's not safe to be honest. It's not safe to be honest about what we think. So I've been shamed on both sides of it, right? I've been shamed for sharing my experience and, scaring people. Oh, you're fear-based. You're trying to scare people into believing that COVID is more deadly than it is and more scary than it is. And I'm like, okay, well, this is just my experience. So now I've just gone to just sharing my experience. Before I was like advocating wear a mask, and then I got this huge, I got these people who were like, oh, masks don't always work, and here's the science for it. And I was like, okay, well, how can we be safer? Condoms don't always work either, yet we're using them,
Yeah.
so like, what can we do? And it is very much like, you're right, Aaron, it's very much like, how can we create the safest experience for ourselves and others? And I acknowledge, like, being home alone, um, the mental health, detriment that this has
It's not any
caused.
safer. Like
It,
it.
Yeah.
Suicides are up through the roof, you
Crazy.
know? Yeah.
Recovery rates, people for in addiction who are normally in recovery, it's like it's been ridiculous how high those rates have gone. So like there's no safe instance
Hmm.
here. There is no way to keep ourselves 100% safe, even if you're isolating completely. I'm just like, you still got to get your groceries, like
Yeah.
unless you live on a farm and, out in the middle of nowhere, you're still having interaction and engagement with other people if you have to work. So really, it's like, how can we support one another in being safer? And I saw this whole thing go down in the burning, our burn group the other day. It was just like people were calling people plague rats for being out with their friends and with their people. It's just like, it's just the shame doesn't help. The shame is just going to cause people to not talk about it and not feel safe in talking about it.
Hmm.
And so I've gotten to this place where I'm just like, I'm going to share my experience. This is what's happening with me. And people have really appreciated it. They're like, oh, I live in a bubble. I didn't know anybody who had it. And I appreciate the 5,000 friends that I have on Facebook, so that I get a glimpse into where people are at in their lives as well. I knew about COVID in February because I have friends who live in China. So like I felt it coming, and I remember going out at the end of, or maybe it was early March, and I remember in my head being like feeling this like danger, like, oh, I'm gonna have to pull out my masks because I had them before from allergies. I'm like, should I? Oh, you know what? I'm not gonna smoke your joint, dude. You know what? I got my own. Thank you very much. Like I already felt that coming on, and there was this part of me that just was like, no. Up until really I got COVID, I did think that there was a possibility that it was being over dramatized, essentially, right? And then I
Hmm.
got it, and I was with a group of people, and like we all got it. And so it was like, oh, this shit's serious. Like now I know people who have gotten it. I've gotten it. Before it was just people's grannies dying, right? It was just people's grannies and grandpas were dying, right? And oh, that's sad, but they're weaker, and yeah, this is a difficult virus. Now I know so many people getting it and
But
who
do
are
you
being
know
affected
people that
by
are
it.
getting it in your age range that are specifically dying from COVID, only COVID? Like they didn't have diabetes or they didn't have another compromised immune system? Because there's a lot of the question now is like the death rate is like they had emphysema and they had COVID, so they're a COVID death. It's like emphysema is pretty deadly too, if you ask me. This person got hit by a car, but they had the COVID virus in them. That's where the numbers are getting a little bit skewed. Like I do think COVID is a real thing. I don't think it is any more deadly than the common flu though.
I don't know, dude. I've had the flu, and I've never had
Because I haven't,
like I
I've not had COVID. I've not had it, so I can't speak to it.
yeah. I definitely think it's more contagious. And I mean, I'm going to sound like a crazy wackadoo, but I feel like this is some sort of man-made infection. I think it's some sort of weird, because I felt it attack each of my systems. I had the weirdest, and I know my body really well, right? Like it's my job to know my body and to help other people learn how to know their bodies.
Hmm.
And so I felt it attacking each of my body system. And basically, any place where it finds a weakness in your body is what it attacks. And so I didn't know this, but I found out from having COVID and being hospitalized for one day. I just went in for all the testing. That I was born with a heart anomaly, a rare heart anomaly that actually makes it to where COVID is more difficult for my heart
Hmm.
because it attacks each of your systems. I had a rash for overnight. That's common. I don't know if you know that, but
Hmm.
like I think 50% of people or 40% of people with COVID will get a rash.
Hmm.
I had a fever. Digestive upset was my first initial symptom, and I had no idea that was even COVID. I had a sore throat, and I thought that was from smoking blunts, because that was not my normal practice. I would, and I had upset stomach, and I was like, oh, I must have just eaten something wrong. Those were my first initial COVID symptoms. And then, I have asthma. That has not really been a problem. So, but my heart, I can't get my heart elevated for more than 15 minutes at a time right now without having chest pains, I have to drink a shit ton of water, and I'm on so many supplements to help support my body in fighting this off. And so I have to say, I don't think that I definitely think it's worse than any kind of flu or cold.
Okay.
And just feeling it attack each part of my body, like a couple of days, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this was just so strange. Like,
Mhm.
it's never had any kind of infection that did that to my body before. And like, I've grown five children. I've been pregnant, I've like, so yeah, I think I don't know anybody personally as of this time who has died from COVID who wasn't like older. And I'm really grateful for that. Excuse me. I do worry about that. I worry about that because, like, I have this rare heart anomaly that affects 0.05% of the normal population. Normally, when it's there, it's also with a lot of other anomalies. I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have known that. But now it makes sense. Like, I get cold feet and cold hands, and my blood pressure is always really low. So now I know that. But like, we don't know who is going to have that rare heart anomaly. We don't know who is going to have, these issues that I know people my age who are dealing with it 10 months later, and
Wow.
they can't exercise for more than 6 minutes, and they feel brain fog. I know people who are dealing with it who can't eat anything. They're on a very limited diet. That was my biggest issue to begin with, was like, I just couldn't eat anything. So yeah, I know people who are still struggling with it 10 months and a year, almost a year later, like having it for so long.
Hmm.
Oh,
And these are
wow.
people my age, but people younger. At 10, no, I saw some research recently that said 25 to 30% of people, college age students who had gotten COVID, had heart issues afterwards.
Hmm.
So like, this is like, me having a heart issue is not uncommon. It's 25% of people these were college students that they tracked that had COVID, because this is when they were trying to do all of these, deciding whether or not they should resume sports.
Mhm.
And so they did studies into college students who were contracting COVID and what the results were for them. And so,
Damn.
yeah, I don't think it's like the heart, but I think that a lot of people think that because they don't have the wide reach of view,
Mm.
right? Like, if
Mhm.
you don't have a view into, I have friends all over the world, because part of what I do is I travel around the world to teach, right? And so I have friends all over the world. And so being able to see like what's happening over in Europe and and fucking New Zealand. I went to New Zealand 2 years ago. It's an amazing, beautiful country. They don't have any fucking COVID. They're partying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
They
like there's got to be something said. If it was just the flu,
True.
everybody gets sick and they go back to partying. But no, they shut down their borders, in and out, basically, and they've, I think that our country, unfortunately, because our leadership is not really trustworthy, there's so much confusion, understandable confusion and lack of trust of our leaders, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, it's a big thing because, yeah, our country is already divided, and then you drop something like this that is completely unknown. And that's the thing that people don't really understand, is that science isn't like, this is science. Here, science says this. It's like, what is, no, science is millions of different researchers who are all doing different kinds of work, who are trying to, they publish a study and then the other people evaluate it and go like, well, the study is not entirely true because of this reason, small sample size or this or that. And so we can't replicate it or whatever. And it's just like, no one knows who to trust. There's no, like, we can't say like, okay, we can trust these people, but it's like, oh, well, actually they're funded by this company, which means we can't trust them anymore. And then, well, okay, well, this company, this and that, and it's like just so confusing. And I feel like, yeah, it's just playing into this weird thing. But I mean, it's like what you were saying earlier. It really is capitalizing on our natural talents at shaming each other, and that's all it is. It's just like a perfect storm for us to like just fire that off. It's like any reason to find fault with other people, and especially when the fear is so high. It's like, describing your symptoms now, it's like, oh, okay, that is a thing to factor in. It may not hit you in the same way, but there might be some small effects that you're not going to want to deal with, but you're going to have to.
there's
But
a group on Facebook called like COVID survivors or something like that. and it's terrifying. Like, somebody added me to the group right when they found out I had it. And like, if you are really, I should share it on Facebook. Like, if you are really uncertain of whether or not this is a real thing, go in there, because I can't go in there. Like, for me, it terrifies me. Like, I
Uh-huh.
had to, when I was isolated by myself with COVID, I had people checking on me and lovers, and they were like, I was like, the worst symptom of COVID is definitely the fear of not knowing. And there were 2 or 3 days in there where I thought I might actually die. Like, I was having chest pains. I had every sign and symptom of a pulmonary embolism or a heart attack. My biological father died from a heart attack in my home, in my arms. So like, there was so much fear. And that's why I went to the hospital. I was just like, let's make sure that I'm not fucking dying. Right.
Yeah.
But, it made a huge difference. Like, me laying in the hospital for 6 hours still, that got rid of my chest pains. It was that I was doing too much. And so like, after that, I got off of Facebook and stopped researching all the science, which is still being, is still being created now, and started watching Netflix for the first time, and just like watched several different, because it is like the fear of not knowing, like, yeah, you might make it okay. And the first week I was like, oh, this is COVID. I'll be better in a week. The first
Huh.
week was fine. Like, all I had was digestive upset and a sore throat. And it was the second week when the heart stuff started coming. I thought I had it. I thought I was going to be one of those who was hardly affected. But, having 5 kids does put a lot of stress on one's person's body, and
Hmm.
asthma, and, traumatic brain, and whatever, any kind of health history that you've ever had. That's what it felt like. It felt like it was attacking any weakness in my system to see where it could go, where it would do the most damage. And
Yeah.
it found one, my heart. And I'm still like, I was super excited and doing paddle boarding like 3 times a week. And I was doing all of this exercising to really get in shape. And now I can't do any of that. The week before last, I tried to do the elliptical for 20 minutes, and I was out for the entire week. I couldn't
Damn.
function beyond my bedroom and home, basically. So I'm coming to terms with, this is going to be a long road to recovery, and it's going to give me all sorts of opportunities to kind of focus on things that I can do from home. My kids and I are doing great. Like, I've found this newfound love for just like hanging out and schooling them and practicing spelling lists. I'm also working on a project called Kink Ed.
Oh,
Um,
okay, yeah.
yeah, and
Okay, yeah, I thought that was Sarah and Joff, but I guess Joff is not, or Sarah's not involved.
yeah,
Is Joff involved?
yes, it's Joff's project, and Sarah Jack, different Sarah,
Oh, okay.
and Sophie Krupp, and they're amazing. And we're working on a project that is something that's really beautiful. It combines performance with education. So we do a weekend, and once we do in-person events, it'll look different. But right now, we do submissions. We get submissions of people, and we showcase all of these different types of kink. And kink is basically anything. It's defined as anything that is outside of what's considered normal, right? That's what kink is. So
Hmm.
it could be group sex, it could be foot fetish stuff, it could be, anything basically. So Friday night we do a performance, and we showcase, like, it's a 2 hour long video performance. And then Saturday we have several different workshops. And then Saturday night, Major and I do Temple of Hedonism. We do a play party, an online virtual play party. And it's been so much fun. So that's one of the projects that I'm working on. And the Temple of Hedonism is basically states that ethical hedonism states that our pleasure should far outweigh our suffering. And for a lot of us, we've been conditioned to this idea that suffering is part of life. Like, right? Like, we attach
Yeah.
to it. Like, we can attach to our suffering. Like, oh, this is going to be so painful. I've got to do this thing that I really don't want to do. And in all reality, like, when we're attached to suffering, we're all being a little fucking kinky. Like, that's
It's
just
true.
kinky right there.
Oh, that's funny.
That's so funny that you say that. So my roommate, we were just having a conversation, and she mentioned something like she has this practice at like Burns where she'll ask people just like very quick, like, what do you want out of life? One word, and kind of pester you. And so she said it, like put pressure on only one word. What is the first word that comes to mind? And it was so weird because the first word that just popped out of my mouth was pleasure. And it was funny because I've done a lot of soul searching and writing and journaling and all the things on like, what do I want out of life and career and this, and pleasures come up. But it was funny that at that moment, that was what I said. And I thought it was interesting because I definitely have that program that like success doesn't come from, success only comes from hard work and pain and, um, yeah, like it should be hard. Work sucks. Work should be bad. Like you got to go and work hard and it's going to suck so that you can get money so then you can have fun. And that's just a story. And I think a lot of people, they love every single moment of the journey of what their work involves, even the hard parts, even the difficult parts and the tedious parts, but they get a pleasure out of it because of what they because of where they're going. And I thought about that in terms of like when I'm working, I should always be looking for the pleasure in it. That was kind of like what I was taking away from that. And it's funny that you kind of brought that up.
So many of us have been conditioned to believe that, seeking of pleasure is a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? Like that just makes us like, yeah. So yeah, I think that, I mean, like my tagline is basically like pleasure for healing, like that. Like we can use pleasure just like pain, like when we touch a hot stove, right?
Hmm.
Pain. Well, that's our first signal. Oh, hot, pain. Okay, let's not do that.
Yeah.
We that wires, in our brain, right? That goes directly to our brain, and our brain learns, oh, hot. But we can also do that with pleasure. We can learn that, oh, that feels good, I like to do that,
Hmm.
and we can rewire our bodies with pleasure as well. So I teach a self pleasure practice, which I'll be doing at the virtual intimacy retreat. That's a program, that's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it's online.
Yeah.
And that's another project, and it's the virtual intimacy retreat, and there'll be a lot of different, I love what Hazel Grace is doing with that, so that's another project I'm involved with. That's January 16th, and I'll be teaching my self pleasure practice, and it's essentially how to use pleasure for clarity, for awakening, for bringing more sensation into the body. Our bodies are so freaking wise. Like we are born with this system there. We're mammals. We are
Yeah.
animals, right? We just have this ability to do higher thinking. And a lot of times it just kind of screws us over. Like we are born with these emotions and programs that tell us, oh, hey, this is not good for you. This is good for you. That sinking pit in the pit of your stomach, that's there to tell you, oh, maybe this isn't good for me, or maybe I'm nervous, I need to work through this, right? But we're
Hmm.
told from very young age, oh, don't be scared, don't be sad, don't be mad. Like all of those emotions are there to teach us and show us something. They're all okay. There are no such thing as a bad emotion, right? Emotions are just energy and motion, and it's just there to show us where to go, what areas of our life need more attention. So, self pleasure, that's another thing I'm doing. I'll be teaching, and it's basically we're all going to masturbate together, and everybody's welcome to. Um, but even the word masturbate comes from like a Greek Latin combo of manstru, which is like hand, and like it's like to defile by hand. The word masturbate was created in a way to cause shame, to
Uh-huh.
defile by hand, right? So that's why I use self pleasure as a term instead, right? So we'll be using that. What else is going on? Oh, I also do a trauma recovery program. I'm part of. It's how to basically somatic processing to really get to the meat and the bones of why we think what we do. It goes into childhood programming. We use a lot of really amazing techniques to help reintegrate the mind and the body, and that's through the mindlight.com. And that's a program here with some really, really awesome people in Austin. Let's see, am I doing anything else? I just started a nonprofit for mental wellness, to help people access the tools for overcoming trauma and overcoming unhealthy childhood programming. And what I've really found, especially through this, is that this is just not available for people who cannot afford it. And oftentimes they're the ones who need it the most.
Mm.
So we are just creating this generational trauma essentially by making these services inaccessible to so many people. So I'm really hoping that that takes off and that we can really provide more people with the services and support that they need to overcome trauma. Is there
I
anything else? I'm
would
writing
love
a
to.
book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to commend you, Sasha. Like, having you on Pirate Utopia has just been super inspiring to like just your confidence around your work and how you express yourself safely and graciously, like you're willing to open the door for somebody that might be new in that area, I find really, really inspiring. And also to hear your take on how having contracted the coronavirus hit you. Like, I, just to be clear, like I am aware of the COVID-19 situation being a real virus. My mom got it. It was a scary situation. But I can only speak from my experience. Like, I haven't felt any effects from it. But what I have felt is like our economic downturn. Like some of my friends that have small businesses or restaurants, they closed or can't open again. Not, let's say, not getting laid for almost a year. Those are the aspects where I'm like, that's how it's affected me. Um, and all of those things I think are extremely serious. And so sometimes like I do need the constant reminder, like, hey, no, I'm your buddy, and like I got it, and this is what it was like. Because just as me, like walking around in a male-bodied human, a white person that's considered to have some couple bucks in his pocket or whatever, it's like the world can feel like your oyster. Like even during a pandemic, you can forget how real some of this reality is for people. And I need that constant reminder. Like, it's good for me to hang out with my girlfriend that nannies, and she's like, hey, we can't go to that place because it's not a very COVID respectable place. Like, I constantly need those reminders. So hopefully anybody that's listening to the show or tunes in is like, not only get something from like what you do as, like, I don't want to say like a sexual therapist, but like in that world from you, but then also just sharing your realness. Like, you came in it and you're like, hey, I didn't think this was a big deal, and then I got it and I was like, holy fuck, I was wrong. Like, very few people ever are willing to admit on record, let alone to their own families, that they're wrong once in a while. So I just want to commend your praises. Like, really, really awesome and inspiring to have you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I appreciate being able to share with you. And I appreciate the platform. Believe it or not, I can be incredibly shy. Um, so, so in some ways, like pandemic has been great for me because I'm like, oh, I don't even have to put on pants. Like I had a lot. What I did notice is I felt a lot of like social pressure to show up and be there for a lot of people. And so, like, honestly, having the and also be a mom to my kids, and so like this has been in so many ways a really hidden gift, and even having it and still not being able to fully do what I want to do. Like, I can't go paddleboarding, right? That's frustrating. I can't go hiking. I can't, like, it's given me so much appreciation too, because I live on these amazing trails. And like, I know I can't go, like, I can go a little bit, but then I'll have to come back. Like, I've been afraid to go on the trail because I'm like, I don't know how far I can go. I got this little fancy watch to tell me like when my heart rate is getting elevated, because I don't know until after I've done it. So it's really given me this appreciation for life in general. And yeah, the times that I didn't take for granted. Like, I've definitely had some grief. I had to take myself to the beach and do a little mushroom ceremony for myself, just to kind of get back on it and just like really take claim for my own mental wellness and where I'm showing up. And like, I started feeling real sorry for myself. I was just like, fuck, I can't do the things I want to do. Like, fuck. And so it was just like, yeah. But creating this, I love what you guys are doing too, because this is creating a community, a common unity where we can come together and we can acknowledge our own wrongdoings. I really think that that's the way through shame, is when we create safety and saying, hey, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say I was wrong. And I think that that's really needed and there's a word for it too. There's like, like how we can recover from that too, because that's traumatizing in itself, being like having everybody kind of get on my case for different things, that can be traumatizing, and I'll just go silent sometimes. Right. But like, instead it's going, well, okay, like I posted something just yesterday or today, and it's like, are you aware of how your perception, how your own experience alters your perception of things? And what I'm coming to feel right now is like the COVID thing, right? My experience, having had COVID, still dealing with issues, is definitely altering my perception of things, right? And what I think is safe and how I think other people are showing up in the world is safe. And I'm like, wow, okay, let's take a seat back, right? Like, this might not feel safe for me and my people and my family, but it might feel exactly safe for them, right? Like, it's for me, this is recognizing how my experience is altering my perception of things. And I want to thank you, Jesse, for saying that too, because that's what basically what we're doing is we're recognizing how our experience alters our perception, right? and and
Totally.
and right now I think what we all want the same thing. We want our people to be okay. We
Mhm.
want everybody to be safe. We just have different ideas of what that looks like.
Mhm.
And for some people, it's like stay home and not see anybody for a year longer, maybe. And for other people, it's like, no, be there for people when they need you, support businesses, let businesses work. I mean, it all looks different for all of us. And I sure as fuck don't know what the answer is. And I don't think there is anybody that does.
Mhm.
People showed up with that shit on masks not being effective. And I was like, well, damn it. Because in the end, I was like, oh, well, if I wear a mask, I'm safe.
Yeah.
This little fucking thing is going to keep me safe. I can go wherever I want, right? It's like, especially like those cloth ones, those panty ones. It's basically like wearing a pair of panties. I mean, even our panties, women's panties have 2 layers, but you got that one little layer. I mean, it's basically just like, it's just to make us feel better. So I actually acknowledge that like some of that science was real, and that there were certain masks that did work, but there's just like there's no safe way right now to live our lives. There's just agreements on how we can be safer with and for each other, right?
Mhm.
So yeah.
And
Yeah.
showing up for like the circles that you do know the right answers for. It's like, so like, especially like, with some of the businesses that you are talking about discussing, it's like you are the expert in that area, but it's like you don't have to be the expert in COVID too. You can be the expert in the area that you're the expert in, and then listen to the actual people studying this, because it seems like with social media it's great to connect with everybody, and everybody has freedom of speech. They can tweet, they can Instagram, whatever, but like not everybody's just all of a sudden an expert on being a virus expert or whatever. Like, and just because you have a voice doesn't make you the expert. I guess is my point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When it first came into town, like in February, March, I was just like inundated. I just nerded out and just tried to, check out and research everything. And I totally made a fool of myself in some ways. I was just like, hey, you guys, I think going in a hot sauna will kill COVID. Let's just all get hot saunas and make hot saunas at home. I found a way to make your own safe home hot sauna, and it was just like, but that was like my trauma response
Mhm.
in knowing that I have a little bit of information
Uh-huh.
and wanting to keep my family safe. I bought like 5 nebulizers for the whole family, giant jars of vitamin C.
Yeah.
That was my trauma response. I can acknowledge that now, but yeah, I think that ultimately we all want the same thing. So if we can just kind of find what that looks like and support each other in that, I think that's where we're at right now. Safer. There is no safe sex either. The only safe sex is with yourself.
Yeah.
So same thing.
And even then, that can get dangerous,
You can hurt yourself. Yes.
Yeah. There are ways to make that dangerous too. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I want to say, yeah, I'm very grateful. I think that you are a really good example of vulnerability, and that's something that I'm exploring in my own life, just in terms of like what we're doing here and putting music out and doing like interacting more on social media, because like I'm very much like I don't really put a lot of social media out because I am scared of the blowback, but I think it's really valuable that we do need to acknowledge, just the same way it's like in sex and in other things, that it's like it's okay to put your ideas out there and put yourself out there and put an opinion out there, and then to realize that maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right or whatever, but to carry that gracefully and to be vulnerable. And I think it's easy, like, it's definitely a big word, be vulnerable, but it's very rare to see someone actually like vulnerability in practice. And so I'm grateful for you to be that example and to take those hits, and I think that you're at a place where you're like ready to be someone who can be like, I'm going to be vulnerable even if it upsets you, or even if this, or to accept that and to be honest, like, okay, I said this, it turns out that's not true, or whatever, and like I've changed my opinion. Because even that, it's like you never want to admit fault, because then no one can trust you ever again. And it's like that totally is it's kind of like with the STI. It's like, oh, if you get an STI, well, I never want to have sex with you, or you're clearly not a good person to ever have sex with, because it's like, we all make mistakes, things happen, whatever. And it's like, that doesn't make you a bad person overall. And I think, yeah, I really want to say grateful for say thank you for putting that out there in the world, in the universe, and especially for me and for Jesse as well.
Thank you guys. Thank you. Yeah, this has been fun. And normally, like, I've been wanting to do podcasts and videos and stuff, and I won't do it unless I have somebody there to talk to. Like, it just me monologuing over here by myself. No, not
Yeah,
gonna
no.
happen. So I appreciate the invitation to just have another place to share what's important to me and what I want to share and out into the world. So yeah, I appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
and to share some of my projects, my passions. Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, when your book's coming out, we'll have you back on again.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
And
can't wait to read it.
You can't call it a podcast. I'm offended. It's not a podcast. It's an online
Okay.
ticket.
What's it called?
Podcast for So 2019.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
What is it?
this is an online kick it.
Online kick it.
Online
All
kick
right.
it. Yeah, we're chilling.
That sounds
We're
a lot better,
sailing.
actually.
I'm just
Yeah,
giving you a hard
podcast is
I'm just
intimidating.
giving you a hard time. You can
Yeah.
call it a podcast if you want.
Okay. Well, that's what Aaron called it. Come on now. I'm throwing you out there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Aaron!
I've been going behind your back and calling it a podcast.
How could you?
Sorry, Jesse.